In past lessons, we've learned about some fascinating ideas about the origin of life. Perhaps from these undersea rocky volcanic vents, Luca emerged into the vast oceans. With a system of DNA that codes for proteins, when DNA is duplicated, sometimes mutations happen, and this means that Luca's descendants had the ability to change over time. And that sets the stage for the creation of the vast tapestry of life that we see on Earth today. This lesson then will be about how populations of organisms can change over time through a natural process. The example we'll use is bacteria. So we'll imagine we have a population of some of Luca's early descendants, and they're feeding. So these are the bacteria cells, and they're feeding on molecules in the environment. So we've colored them red here, and these individuals can eat the green molecules. Let's zoom in a little bit. We'll see that these little dots represent food molecules in the ocean, and if the cell has an arrow going towards that molecule, in this case the green one here, it means that the bacteria can feed on that food molecule. So this population of Luca's descendants had the capacity to eat the green food molecules. Now, acquiring food then allows the bacteria to grow and reproduce. Remember, Luca was equipped with DNA. DNA can be duplicated. And so in time then, the population will grow. As they reproduce, the population numbers increase. Let's remind ourselves what that would have looked like. Here we have a population of bacteria. The rod-shaped cells here are bacteria. These other ones are larger cells, single-celled organisms, but we're focusing on the bacteria. And the lightning bolt here is calling attention to this one over here. This bacterium is in the process of dividing. So as bacteria feed, they grow. As they grow larger, they face an energy limitation and they have to divide to reduce their size. Of course, dividing is their form of reproduction, and this is one of the basic characteristics of living things. So here we see the bacterium is about to separate into two offspring. So the parent bacterium has reproduced to make two offspring. So as this population feeds and then reproduces, the population numbers increase, but this means that the food resources are being depleted, and some bacteria then may have difficulty getting enough nutrition. So we're going to indicate that with these X's. We're going to cross out a few of these bacteria, indicating that they have starved. Notice the green dots, the green food molecules are becoming scarce. Now this is a general principle found in nature, that there's a competition for food, and this applies to in many areas of the natural world. Now in the 1800s, biologists coined a phrase. They called this situation a struggle for existence. Now notice, it's not an actual sort of struggle necessarily between two individuals, but you can struggle with your environment as well. In this case, the struggle is the struggle to get enough food. As food resources are depleting, there's a struggle to maintain one's survival. Now, a struggle for existence means that many won't survive to reproduce. If you starve before you reproduce, then you're taken out of the game. So there's massive death occurring in nature, caused by lack of food, but other things as well. Predators, of course, disease, climate challenges, etc. So this idea of a struggle for existence is a general concept, and it takes many forms. It can be a struggle to get enough food, it can be a struggle against predators, to avoid predators, it can be a struggle against climate conditions or disease or whatever. That's the struggle for existence. Now notice then, in this second generation here, we have a blue bacterium. And the blue bacterium was born different than the red bacteria. It has a new mutation. DNA mutations can change protein function, which can change the cell's characteristics or traits. So while we're indicating it as being blue, and that is a difference than red, there are other differences as well that will be more significant. So if being blue were the only difference, it might not make a difference to survival. We're more interested in the relevant variations. Variations is a term referring to differences. Relevant variations are differences that make a difference to survival. Some variations are significant, like the ability to get food efficiently. So let's see what the blue bacterium can do. The blue bacterium can feed on the orange food molecules. So unlike the red bacteria, which can only feed on the green molecules, the blue one can feed on the green and the orange food molecules. So the existence of variation means that individuals have an unequal chance of survival. It's not random who survives and who dies. The relevant difference is that the blue bacteria can import the orange molecule as food. This ability gives them an advantage compared to the red bacteria. The blue bacteria retain the ability to metabolize the green food. They can feed on two kinds of food molecules, and this is a significant advantage when one kind of food becomes scarce. So again, we see here the blue bacterium was feeding on green, but it can also feed on orange food molecules, whereas the red bacteria can only feed on the green. So the blue bacteria have an advantage. Now, individuals with the most useful traits survive and reproduce more than others. And as a result, individuals with the most useful traits increase in the population each generation. So as we look at this sequence of generations then, we had more red bacteria over here and one blue one here, but as time goes by, as the generations unfold, the population is becoming more and more blue. But it's not that the red bacteria are turning blue. No. Rather, the blue bacteria are having more offspring and replacing what would have been the offspring of the red bacteria. So we don't want to think of the red ones as turning blue. It's rather the blue ones are having more babies, more offspring, than some of the red ones who are dying as a result of starvation. So the blue, individuals with the blue characteristic, the orange food-eating characteristic, are increasing at a greater rate than the red bacteria. So such a change in the frequency of traits in the population is called evolution. It's important to note that populations evolve, individuals do not. Individuals are simply born with whatever DNA they inherited from their parents, plus any new mutations. So the blue bacterium was born with a mutation. It inherited lots of DNA from the red parents, but it has a new mutation. Now, it was born that way. It's not that in the course of their lives the red ones are turning blue. No, the blue ones were born that way, and they are out reproducing. They are reproducing more successfully than the red competitors. The population is evolving a new adaptation, and the adaptation is the ability to utilize a new food source, the orange food molecules. The change in the population occurred in response to a change in the environmental conditions, the depletion of the green food molecules. So it was the depletion of the green food molecules that set up a situation where the blue bacterium now had an advantage because it could eat a different food molecule. So it all started with one individual, but that individual had more than the average number of offspring, and so did its descendants each generation. So here we have the beginning of the process. The orange food-eating trait is going to increase in frequency as the generations go by. Pretty soon the entire population is composed of individuals that can eat both the green and the orange food molecules. Now, it's also important to note here that the bacteria were not originally designed to eat the orange food molecules. Rather, they evolved this ability through a natural process. So you see, the bacteria in the past were incapable of eating the orange food molecules. Nevertheless, bacteria showed some variation due to DNA mutations in food acquisition, and the environment then went on to favor the orange food-eating trait. And that led to this process where the orange food-eating trait increased in frequency in the population, changing the population. So we see that the population of bacteria is evolving a new capacity to eat the orange food molecules. They were not originally designed to do so. Well, why would anybody think the bacteria might have been designed? Well, this was a common view in the 1800s. William Paley, for example, argued that if you see organisms that have parts with purposes, that can only be explained by an intelligent designer. And so for Paley would have argued that since we see the bacteria today, we don't see them in the past, today we see they can eat orange food molecules, Paley would have said, well, they were designed to eat orange food molecules. This is part of this worldview that the world is an artifact, that living things, and in fact the whole earth and universe, was constructed by an intelligent mind, by God. And so again, the Christians in the 1800s were going to argue that living things were designed by an intelligent designer. Now along comes then Charles Darwin, biologist, and in 1859, at his residence outside of London, he wrote a book that changed forever the way biologists look at the natural world, On the Origin of Species by Means of Natural Selection. And in this book, he argued against this special creation hypothesis that God specially designed each and every species and equipped them with adaptations. Darwin argued that what was happening in nature was the very process that we've been looking at. And he called this process natural selection. And that referred to the process that causes a population to evolve adaptations. So this sequence of events up here, Darwin is going to argue, is a natural process, and it explains how it is that species become equipped with adaptations, useful traits that help them survive and reproduce. Now, natural selection can be summarized as the differential survival and reproduction of individuals with the most fit traits. And a fit trait is a DNA-based trait that helps the individual in its current environment. It has to be DNA-based so it can be passed on. It's a heritable trait. Now, the term natural selection is natural because it's environmental conditions that are interacting with populations to change them over time. It's not God. And it's a selection. Darwin used this word selection because the environmental conditions like food scarcity, predators, disease, climate, etc. are causing individuals with different traits to have different survival outcomes. Now, the word selection sometimes invokes this metaphor of a conscious being selecting, but there's nothing consciously going on here. This is just a cause and effect process. It's a lack of food. In the case up here, it's a lack of food that is selecting, that is favoring individuals that can eat another food molecule. In summary then, some key points. There is a struggle for existence in nature. More offspring are produced than can possibly survive to reproduce. So there's massive death due to food scarcity, predation, disease, climate, etc. There exists heritable variation in populations due to DNA mutations, for example. These are differences that make a difference to survival. And due to variations, individuals have unequal chances for survival. So there's a non-random process going on here. Individuals with useful traits have a survival advantage. Useful traits increase in the population over time. Evolution, that's what we call that process, evolution. And it is populations that evolve, individuals do not. They're simply born with whatever DNA they got from their parents and any new mutations. And Darwin argued that natural selection was the cause of this evolutionary process.